In the last video, we made an index.html page with the basic structure for our copy of the Google homepage. Now we're going to get creative with the styling, starting off with the navbar in this video. So here's the Google homepage and this is our starting point. Now let's dive right into the navbar and give it a closer look. You might have noticed that at the moment all our links are underlined. That's the default browser styling. So the first thing I want to do is to get rid of the underline for every link in the page by targeting all anchor tags and setting the text decoration property to none. Once that's done, our links will look exactly as expected. Just a normal text for both left and right links, as well as all other anchor tags. In order to find out what styles apply to the About link, I'm going to use the developer tools by right-clicking on the Google homepage and selecting the Inspect option. If I hover the cursor on the About link, I can see this having a hexadecimal color value of #202124, which is a shade of black, an Arial font of 14 pixel size with a sans serif fallback, a right margin of 5 pixels, a left margin of 15 pixels, and a padding of 5 pixels all around the element. Let's jump into our code editor and implement all that. First, I will target all the anchor tags inside the first nav div using both a descendant selector and the first of type pseudo selector. This will set all styling properties in common for the links containing to the left div, and namely About and Store. They share same font size, font family, and color. Back in the browser, we can make sure they now feature the newly implemented style. Nice. What differs between the two is the margin around them. While About has a left margin of 15 pixels, Store only has a left and right margin of 5. Padding remains consistent at 5 pixels, so we can add that to our left div anchor tag style. We are then going to target the first link inside the left div, our About link, by making use of the first of type pseudo selector once more, this time applying it to the anchor tag as well. Here we specify the margin property using the shorthand syntax, which takes in 4 numbers, respectively for top, right, bottom and left margin. We then target the store link by using the nth of type pseudo selector this time and passing 2 as an argument. Both links seems now to have the right spacing. Time to inspect the right links now, Gmail and images. Looks like they have a 15 pixels padding around and in between them, and the only difference from the left link is a font size of 13 pixels instead of 14 and a different shade of black. Since our navbar right div is a whole container with no sub divs, we can directly target Gmail and images using a combination of descendant and pseudo selectors. Again, common styling will be font size, font family, color, for which I've reused the one implemented for the left links since it's just a shade of black and it's hard to tell the difference, and the left margin. We are then going to add the same margin to the last anchor tag inside the right div, images, on the right side, and as you can see, the page will update the spacing for our right links. Now the funny bit, by inspecting the Google Apps icon with the DevTools, we can see that this is an SVG element. That means it's a scalable vector graphic image containing the shape of the path responsible for drawing the wanted shape. In order to make this working, we will select the SVG element in the Elements tab and right-click on it. From here, I'm going to copy the outer HTML, which is a raw string containing the element itself with all its children. I will then create a new file in the project folder, and since this is an SVG file for the Google Apps button, I will call this file google-apps-icon.svg. We can easily add this file to our index.html by adding an image tag inside the button, the source of which will be our newly created SVG file, and specifying an alternative text for accessibility reasons. Should the image be broken, the browser will display some descriptive text for that image. In our case, Google Apps icon. I have also added a custom class to the button so that it will be easier to target in our CSS file. Let's now take a close look to the SVG button. The button itself is 40 pixels wide and 40 pixels high, with a margin of 4 pixels on each side. This will make the icon 48 by 48 pixels, and the color is a shade of gray. The SVG icon is 44 44 by 44 pixels. We can implement that by selecting the Google-apps-button class and setting width and height of that button to be 40 pixels. Shorthand syntax for the margin will be 4 pixels. We also want to specify the border as none and the background color should be transparent. As far as the image, we'll use the descendant selector to target the only image tag inside our button and set the width of 24 pixels as well as the height. Let's check in the browser how it looks like. There's a suspicious top margin applied to the icon, which shifts down the entire right div, and it's also broken. Let's remove the margin by commenting out a rule we declare while implementing the page structure to push down the Google logo, as we don't need it anymore. There you go. Now our right div is back at the top right corner of the page. To fix the broken SVG, we just have to add the XMLS attribute. Since SVG is an XML dialect, a language similar to HTML where you can name your tag what you want, and since the browser sees the SVG file as an XML file, we need to specify which dialect of XML the browser should use to handle our SVG image, which in our case, of course, is SVG. We also have to specify which color should be the SVG, and we do that by adding a fill attribute with a shade of gray as a value. And if we check the result in the browser, we can see that now our SVG icon is there, only it's not aligned horizontally to the other elements. That's not a problem, as we specify a right div to be a flex container with an align items property of center. And now everything is aligned properly. Finally, we'll be styling the sign in button based on what we see by inspecting it with the dev tools. Okay, the color, which will be the text color, is white. The font is Google Sans, but we won't bother implementing that just yet, as this is similar to the Arial font we have in place at the moment. The font size, it's 14 pixels. The button has a blue background, a left-right margin of 8 pixels, and a padding of 9 pixels top-bottom and 23 pixels left-right. Let's add those properties to our sign-in button class and give it a border value of none, as well as a slight border radius of 4 pixels. Our sign-in button is now styled as expected, and if we compare what we have implemented with live Google homepage, we can see that our navbar on the top looks basically identical to the original on the bottom. You might think we're done, but there's still some minor things to address. For starters, when hovered with the mouse pointer, all links should be underlined. This result can be achieved by targeting all anchor tags in our page with the hover pseudo selector and specify the text decoration as underlined. As you can see, our links are now being underlined when hovered. Another thing we're missing is the round gray circle around the Google Apps icon on hover. Back in our code, we can make use again of the hover pseudo selector, this time on the Google-apps-button class. We can then specify the same background color as the one we see on the original icon circle and a border radius of 50%. This will ensure our button is a perfect circle. Let's check in the browser what the result looks like. Perfect. The gray circle is there when hovering the Google Apps icon. It might be difficult to notice, but the sign-in button has a hover effect too. The background color turns of a slightly lighter blue, and there's a bit of shadow casted by the button itself, and the cursor turns into a pointer. Again, with the hover pseudo selector, we can now add those values to our sign-in button, which now features the specified effects when hovered. We can finally add the cursor as a pointer to all buttons, icon included, and the final result would be a navbar identical to the one featured on the Google homepage.